Picture an entire capital city swallowed by darkness. No heat, no water, no way to reach home. This is not distant fiction. For millions across Ukraine, it is the nightmare of everyday life. Let us dwell for a moment on what this truly means. Imagine a city like Kyiv, whose population numbers in the millions, transformed overnight into a ghostly landscape. Streetlights flicker and then go out. Apartment buildings, once aglow, become black silhouettes against a starless sky. The hum of everyday life, the sound of trams, the chatter of markets, the warmth of home, vanishes, replaced by silence and the anxious shuffling of feet in the dark. In a single day, more than 450 drones and nearly 30 missiles battered the country's vital infrastructure. The assault did not stop at the front lines. It struck at the core of civilian existence. Major cities, Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Sumy, Poltava, and Chernihiv, were cast into blackout. Entire districts disappeared into shadow. In Kyiv alone, almost half the population instantly lost both power and running water. To grasp the scale, picture Paris or New York, cities that never sleep, suddenly plunged into total darkness. No subway, no traffic lights, no working elevators. This is not an inconvenience. It is a collapse of the very systems that allow modern life to function. Think back to the Great New York Blackout of 1977, when chaos reigned for just over a day. In Ukraine, the blackout is not hours, but days, weeks, and, possibly, months. The consequences struck fast and mercilessly. Trams and buses stopped. Subways froze. With cars gridlocked and no light to guide them, thousands drifted through pitch-black streets, desperately searching for a path home or to work. The urban pulse gave way to confusion and dread. People resorted to using flashlights or even candles to make their way. In some cases, neighbors tied ropes from building to building, using them as guides through the pitch-black streets, much like Londoners did during the Blitz of World War II, when the city was forced into blackout conditions to avoid aerial bombings. The difference, then, the blackouts were a precaution. Here, they are the aftermath of direct attacks. And what did officials tell people? Charge your phones, store water. For a nation on the edge, these words are little comfort. The certainties of modern life, warmth, light, safety, are not just threatened. They are slipping away. It is worth pausing to remember how, during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, similar advice was given. Prepare emergency kits, store water, stay put. Yet, in both cases, such recommendations barely scratch the surface of what was required for survival. When the basics fail, so too does the sense of security that glues a society together. Now, the danger is not only hardship. Ukraine is on the brink of losing all essentials, facing freezing cold and the specter of a humanitarian disaster. Hospitals, schools, and businesses hang in the balance. Families stare at the coming winter, fearing it brings not hope, but a fight for survival. Consider a hospital in Kharkiv, where premature babies depend on incubators. When the power fails, their lives are measured by the minutes batteries can hold out. Or a school in Dnipro, forced to close indefinitely, its students scattered, their education paused. Businesses, cafes, small workshops, even large factories, are forced to shut down, laying off workers who may have no other means to earn a living. This chaos is no temporary glitch. It marks the start of a harsher era. How did Ukraine reach this critical point? To understand this crisis, we need to trace the campaign of targeted strikes and their devastating logic. What changed in the calculus of both Kyiv and Moscow to bring Ukraine to the edge? This is not a simple blackout. This is the calculated dismantling of Ukraine's lifelines, unfolding in real time. What started as scattered outages has exploded into a full-blown national emergency. Waves of pinpointed strikes have shattered Ukraine's energy and supply networks. Thermal power plants, hydroelectric dams, and critical gas lines lie crippled. Experts warn repairs may stretch on for months, or even longer, as winter draws near. The timing could hardly be more dire. Cities like Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhzhia, and Kremenchuk now teeter on the brink of disaster. Over 1 million households, including thousands in the very heart of Kyiv, have been thrust into darkness. Without electricity or running water, families are left to endure the freezing nights, while businesses falter and close their doors. Historical parallels help us understand the gravity. During World War II, the siege of Leningrad saw citizens survive in darkness and hunger for almost 900 days. Today, Ukraine's cities face a modern version of siege, cut off not by walls, but by the systematic destruction of grids and pipelines. Yet the collapse goes deeper than darkened windows. Ukraine's arteries of movement, trains, highways, and railways, have seized up. Passenger trains stand motionless. Highways are gridlocked. Emergency vehicles cannot reach those in need. This is not just disruption, it is paralysis, threatening to choke daily life and vital services. In Kyiv, for example, ambulances reported response times tripling overnight. In Odessa, refrigerated trucks carrying food spoiled within hours, leading to shortages in supermarkets. The logistical breakdown ripples outward, multiplying the impact of every single strike. For the first time, the government is issuing stark warnings. Citizens must prepare for life with no power or water for the foreseeable future. This is not a passing hardship. It is the steady, grinding breakdown of everything that keeps a society functioning: electricity, heat, water, and movement. Such warnings recall the Great Ice Storm of 1998 in Canada, when millions lost power for weeks. Then, local governments opened emergency shelters in schools and churches, distributed blankets, and trucked in portable generators. Today, Ukraine faces the same logistical challenge, on a much larger, war-torn scale. The stakes could not be higher. Widespread deprivation is now reality. Families and businesses are being pushed to their limits. The threat is no longer distant. It is here, testing the will of a nation and the survival of millions. Yet even as the crisis deepens, Ukraine's leaders are forced to confront new, agonizing choices. Their response now will shape not just survival, but the fate of the entire conflict. Wars are not decided only by weapons on the battlefield. They are shaped and sometimes lost in shadowy control rooms and cabinet meetings. Now, Ukraine's leaders are reeling under the weight of their own choices, as the consequences sweep far beyond the trenches. Recent Ukrainian strikes deep into Russian border regions triggered a swift and brutal response. Russian forces unleashed a torrent of missiles and drones, their targets chosen with surgical precision: Ukraine's energy infrastructure. These counterattacks were not simply retaliatory, they were catastrophic. Ukraine's air defenses and supply routes were quickly overwhelmed. Entire districts in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Sumy, Poltava, and Chernihiv vanished into darkness overnight. Left Bank Kyiv, nearly half the capital, lost all power and water in a single night. But the wounds run deeper still. Over 60% of Ukraine's domestic gas production, centered in Poltava and Kharkiv, was obliterated. This one strike erased basic heating and electricity for millions. The cost to replace this loss is staggering. Nearly €2 billion must be found to import emergency gas for winter, if it can even be sourced at all. This is not just another disruption. Transportation has collapsed, highways are jammed, trains frozen in place, and supply chains choked across the nation. For hundreds of thousands, the world has shrunk to cold, dark rooms and empty pipes as winter's grip tightens. Consider a hypothetical family in Sumy. Their apartment, once warm and filled with laughter, now echoes with the sound of dripping taps and whistling winds. Children wear coats indoors, parents ration candles, and meals are cooked on makeshift stoves. This is not an isolated story. It is repeated in home after home, city after city, across Ukraine. Desperation now shapes the government's message. After months of unyielding rhetoric, officials abruptly pivot, calling for an immediate ceasefire. This is a complete reversal, no longer insisting on distant peace talks, but pleading for a halt right now, without conditions. Inside military circles, the truth is grim. Defensive lines are fraying, morale is sinking, and emergency troop shifts barely hold the front together. The battlefront is splintering in 5 or 6 critical directions. Exhausted resources and faltering will are testing even the most devoted units. Strategic exhaustion is spreading, not just through the armed forces, but across Ukraine's energy grid, economy, and society. As homes freeze and factories go dark, the nation's resilience is being stretched to its limits. The struggle is no longer just about defending land. It is about the survival of the country itself. With front lines breaking and cities suffocating in blackouts, Ukraine stands at a pivotal crossroads. The next decision could alter not just its future, but the entire balance of power in the region. As Ukraine's leadership faces the harsh new reality, the world is watching for their next move. Will the promise of aid or diplomatic intervention arrive in time to shift the course? Or is the country already past the point of no return? When darkness falls, it is not only comfort that is lost, society itself begins to fracture. The threat now overshadows mere inconvenience or cold apartments. As millions brace for a bone-chilling winter without electricity, heat, or running water, families are forced to consider the unthinkable, abandoning their homes, their cities, even their homeland, in a desperate quest to survive. This is not a slow-moving exodus, but the makings of a tidal wave, one that could redraw the map of Ukraine for generations. Every region feels the tremor of fear. Rumors swirl about the deliberate targeting of critical infrastructure, stoking memories of tragedies like the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. The Zaporizhzhia hydroelectric station now stands at the edge of a knife. If such a lifeline were shattered, the resulting flood and chaos would add catastrophe atop catastrophe, propelling even more people into flight. This chaos does not exist in a vacuum. Russia is exploiting the crisis, rolling out new military technologies and displaying brutal innovations in real time. Bombardment drones, electronic warfare systems, and advanced missiles are not only being unleashed, they are being showcased for the world. These weapons are now part of Russia's diplomatic arsenal, exported to partners like China, India, and North Korea, with the promise of shared power. The blackout in Ukraine becomes a showroom, a living demonstration of new ways to fight and dominate. Western analysts, once dismissive, are now unsettled. Moscow's forces have adapted rapidly, unveiling flexible command systems, relentless attacks on energy grids, and a willingness to escalate. Suddenly, Russia exerts more influence, not just in Eastern Europe, but across the whole of Eurasia, as its tactics and weaponry are emulated and acquired by others. The region is becoming a volatile chessboard. Turkey is moving assertively, broadening its reach from the Bosporus to the Caspian Sea. The United States, determined not to be sidelined, is refocusing on Afghanistan and the Black Sea, seeking to retain strategic relevance. Every move adds tension, risk, and uncertainty. The struggle is no longer just for Ukraine's survival. It is about who will shape the new order. Inside Ukraine, the mood has shifted. Appeals for a ceasefire now sound less like negotiation and more like a last-ditch plea for survival. The rhetoric of officials has changed, from fierce defiance to a raw, almost pleading hope for a pause, if only to salvage what remains of the nation's infrastructure and population. The threat is existential: loss of territory, the flight of millions, and a new Eurasian order where Ukraine's very sovereignty is at stake. Amid this turmoil, what choices are truly left for Ukraine's leaders and its people? With the stakes now clear, the nation faces a crossroads. Every decision could determine not only Ukraine's fate, but the balance of power far beyond its borders. In Ukraine's new landscape of darkness, survival is no longer a distant fear. It is an urgent, daily challenge. For millions of Ukrainians, adapting means more than grit. It means taking concrete steps, fast. Power banks, batteries, and even wax candles become lifelines. Water reserves and basic filters must be stockpiled, as running taps could fall silent for days or even weeks. Old skills, wood fire cooking, window insulation, and first aid, move from nostalgia to necessity. Communities able to pool resources and shield the vulnerable will stand the best chance of holding on to fragments of normal life. Let us consider practical scenarios. In Lviv, a network of neighbors has formed a mutual aid group, rotating food and fuel supplies and sharing generators. In Mykolaiv, local schools have been repurposed as warming centers, staffed by volunteers who distribute soup and blankets. These grassroots efforts echo the resilience seen in London during the Blitz, when community canteens fed thousands and kept the spirit of the city alive. Yet personal preparedness can only go so far. For leaders in Kyiv and across the country, rhetoric must yield to urgent action. Emergency shelters need to be identified and stocked, critical supplies rationed, and plans made for the likely collapse of basic services. Clear, honest communication, no more optimistic promises, will help citizens brace for outages lasting not just hours, but weeks. Political capital must be spent on disaster management and infrastructure, not on public image. Consider the experience of Iceland during the 1973 volcanic eruption on Heimaey, when authorities evacuated an entire island in a day and provided shelter and food for months. Ukraine's government must now show similar flexibility and foresight, ready to relocate populations or set up field hospitals if urban centers become unlivable. Ukraine's partners face their own reckoning. Sending aid through broken supply lines or patching fragile grids is no longer enough. Western allies must rethink support, drawing hard lessons from how Russia has adapted its networks under relentless attack. The answer may lie in portable generators, microgrids, and rapid repair kits, decentralized solutions less vulnerable to strikes. The window for change is shrinking. Without bold, immediate shifts, chronic humanitarian crisis could become Ukraine's new normal. To illustrate, after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, authorities rapidly deployed thousands of mobile power stations and water purification units, restoring basic services far faster than predicted. The lesson for Ukraine's allies: flexibility, rapid deployment, and redundancy can be the difference between disaster and survival. Ultimately, everyone involved, citizens, leaders, international allies, must redefine what resilience means. Waiting for outside rescue is no longer an option. Adaptation for the long term is essential. Blackouts are not fleeting disruptions, but a new structural reality for this winter, and perhaps beyond. The time for illusions is over. Survival now demands a new kind of strength, reshaping daily life for an altered world, not simply enduring it. This demands practical steps for daily living: create neighborhood support groups, rotate food and fuel stocks, and keep communal kitchens running. Invest in solar panels, even small ones, to keep communication devices operational. Map out locations of the nearest wells, natural springs, or community water tanks, information that could mean life or death. The stakes are existential. Survival, dignity, and Ukraine's ability to choose its own future now hang by a thread. Each day of darkness pushes collective action from urgent to unavoidable. As the blackout deepens, a new question emerges. Can Ukraine find opportunity amid crisis, or will this winter mark a permanent turning point? The coming weeks will reveal who adapts and who is left behind. Waiting for spring is not a strategy, only a way to drift toward disaster. Each new strike cripples more of Ukraine's energy grid, transforming inconvenience into a deepening crisis with no easy solution. Rolling blackouts, broken water lines, and ice-filled homes are no longer rare. They are becoming the new normal across much of the country. Authorities advise citizens to charge phones and store water, but these are stopgaps, not a plan. Already, millions spend their nights without light, warmth, or running water, and with every passing week, that number grows. As winter settles in, the prospect of a total blackout is not a distant threat. It is close at hand. Inside government halls, even the most hopeful officials now privately discuss an immediate ceasefire, not as a sign of strength, but out of sheer necessity. The sudden shift from defiant resistance to urgent talks reveals how desperate the situation has become. With each hour of darkness, Ukraine's capacity to sustain basic life, let alone continue the fight, slips further away. Hope alone is no longer viable. Without decisive action, entire cities may go not just days, but months without power, heat, or safe water. The stakes are nothing less than the survival of entire communities, the unity of the nation, and any certainty about the future. This crisis cannot be solved by slogans or waiting for rescue. Resilience now means confronting the full scale of the threat, making hard choices, and adapting to a reality even officials no longer try to soften. Ukraine's very sovereignty, its reputation with allies, and the region's balance of power depend, not on hope, but on immediate, deliberate action. So, as Ukraine stands at this historic crossroads, the question remains: how will the nation and its people respond? Will they find new strength and solutions in the face of darkness? Or will this winter's shadow become permanent, altering the course of history for generations to come? When the lights come back on, if they do, the world will look to Ukraine and remember not just how the crisis began, but how it was met. The story is not yet finished. The next chapter is being written now, in every home, every shelter, and every decision taken in the dark.